Warning. You will hear things you have not heard in church. If you are easily shaken by the truth, this is not the show for you. You are watching Now You See TV. Time to wake up.
And what's up, everybody? Good night and welcome to Now You See TV. I'm your host, Jake Grant, and yes, I'm wearing a cool new hat. I went all the way to Texas and got one there to Cracker Barrel. So what do you know? I'm wearing a cool hat for a great show we have scheduled this evening, and it's in regards to artificial intelligence. What does it take for Terminator to come true? Now, we're going to be joined by Gary Wayne, the author of the Genesis 6 Conspiracy. Welcome to Now You See TV, Gary.
Well, so happy to be here and back with you again tonight, Jake. And I do think your hat looks absolutely awesome on you. Maybe that's that old saying out of one of those movies from way back, marvelous or something like that. No, it looks good, and just excited to be here tonight.
So, guys, tonight we are talking, are humans playing God in their creation of artificial intelligence? Where does the line between science fiction cool and science fiction creepy get drawn? Gary Wayne's going to be breaking this down for us, and I just wanted to read a quote from Elon Musk, who is a big entrepreneur, the founder of SpaceX, and he said this about artificial intelligence. With artificial intelligence, we are summoning the demon. In all those stories where there's the guy with the pentagram and the holy water, it's like, yeah, he's sure he can control that demon, but it doesn't work out. And that's what Elon Musk said about modern AI technology. And we're going to be getting into artificial intelligence, Sophia, quantum computing, all this stuff that's kind of tying into artificial intelligence today. And really, it's some freaky stuff. So, Gary, let's break into this topic. Where do we start with artificial intelligence?
Well, that's a good question in itself, because artificial intelligence it's connected to so many other things that are going on today, and because it's like we're seeing a convergence. So you've got not only the amount of knowledge that's being developed and the amount of data and the computer systems, and into quantum computing, which is connected to AI. But you also have science being developed in all sorts of different areas. And we have all of this sort of converging and changing our lives. And it's all in pursuit of how do we create this demon thing that Elon Musk is suggesting you want to be very, very careful to tap into. And I don't think he was saying that in an allegorical fashion. I think he and everybody who are very well versed in these very much high levels of quantum computing, artificial intelligence, interdimensional thinking, quantum physics, they are quite familiar with the understanding that this demon aspect is not just an allegory, because a lot of these people are initiated into the mysteries, and science is sort of that outward mask, like that theater mask or the crazy clown demon mask look, right? Because it's what's underneath is who they are and what they really believe. And I don't think most people understand that when we talk about AI, we need to talk about quantum mechanics, because people are thinking that quantum mechanics is going to do a certain amount of things to bring about the end time and to push into further science and things. And the sort of common thought is they need AI to partner with quantum mechanics and quantum computing, which they're starting to do, to complete it. And so they need to marry the two, which has a very interesting sort of connotation and understanding when you get to it. And if you think about where all of this sort of begins is because artificial intelligence goes deeper than just what we can see. It's going to get into the quantum sort of world. It's going to get into nanotechnology. It's going to get into the the whole aspect of quantum ideology. And if we understand that quantum mechanics has been working for, being put together for the last 100 years or so. And it's sort of like stepchild coming out of that, or sister is Sophia, or the artificial intelligence. Then you won't be surprised to learn that, Wolfgang Pauli, who is considered the sort of pioneer of quantum mechanics, he was deeply into the occult, which is what I was referring to. And this is not uncommon. He's an individual that was into alchemy, and a fan of Carl Jung, and totally into Eastern religions, and totally believe that if you want to understand this whole concept of artificial intelligence and quantum mechanics and quantum computing as sort of descends out of that, you have to understand Eastern mysticism. And then as that sort of progresses, you get pioneers like Niels Bohr and Werner Heisenberg, and both of them consulted the Vedas for better understanding. And in fact, they thought that their experiments were completely consistent with teachings out of the Vedas.
And real quick, we want those who are watching to interact with the show tonight. So if you guys who usually join the NYCTV chat over at nyctv.org, well, we have transitioned over to nystv.org. I just wanted to make this quick announcement. So people who usually join the family chat and ask questions at the end of the show, this is where you're going to be going now. So you can jump over to nystv.org and click the live stream hub. This is the new place to watch the show if you want to join in on our community and ask questions. And also, if you guys could, we recently lost all of our mailing list. One of the software people who were kind of handling our mailing list, they totally deleted all of our context. So we set it up here. If you join this page, you can sign up for our mailing list and find out about shows like this one, and be able to sign up. Also join in on the chat, and also on YouTube. If our moderators, we love you guys if you'd be willing to send me over questions during the show. So back to the topic, the occult ties to artificial intelligence and those who are getting into this quantum computing thing. You said they seem to stem out of the Vedic text. Now I know John has done some research in the Vedic texts and done a show on those, but what is it with the Vedic text that seems to be promoting this hyper just intelligence and type of electronic design? What are they getting out of the Vedic texts?
Two things: the sort of basics, sort of theory and thought, and then down to some very, very key points in what's going to guide sort of the nuts and bolts of their research. And they believe it's all encoded, and specifically into the Upanishads is seemingly the one that is the Vedas, that is the most important. That's the one that they'll refer to. And what they would say is that there's a unity, and I'm going to read this, there's a unity and a continuity of the Vedanta that is reflected in the unity and the continuity of wave mechanics. So they're basically saying they're talking and are kind of one of the same thing. And Heisenberg, he thought that quantum theory makes sense to people who read the Vedanta and consider Vedic thought, and that's exactly what he's referring to when he talks about that. And then as they get into this understanding of waves and particles, that's where you start to get into this whole understanding of the quantum world. And the idea of quantum entanglement is an idea that comes from their idea of knowledge and the knowledge of the universe, that is held at the quantum level. And that, go ahead.
The concept of quantum entanglement encompasses the idea that one atom here somehow is directly influential to another atom somewhere else in the universe somewhere.
Yeah, and in any dimension too. And so dimensions are a key part of this understanding, and that's how things are communicated instantaneously everywhere, and it's what holds everything sort of together in that sort of thought process. And so people understand the normal sort of particles in this whole understanding, but there's one that they're searching for, and we'll probably come back around a little bit on that if we get into the CERN aspect, which is, again, is kind of all interrelated here. But they're searching for what they call the God particle. And you've heard that term come out of CERN, but this is a little bit different. And that's why there's a lot of dispute as to what the God particle is and whether or not they're actually trying to get, you know, what happened at the point of the Big Bang, of the start of the universe, as science would call it. But what they're searching for is something called the ATMA, A-T-M-A, or A-T-H-M-A-N, no, A-T-M-A-N. And this is a invisible particle, and it doesn't merge with all of the other particles, but it sort of manipulates the particles in, and this is typical Veda thought. And so what it is that it is the soul and the consciousness and the communicator of the instructions and the information and the decisions to all the particles in the universe in quantum entanglement that goes out instantly. And it works through the particles, like it avatars the particle, which again is that Eastern Vedic sort of thought. And it is the true life force. And it is the undiscovered particle because they don't even know how to find it, but that's what they're kind of searching for as they get down to it. And it has different properties than other particles. And this is what is holding the knowledge of the universe and communicates it everywhere, which they'd love to be able to tap into. So if you want artificial intelligence that is going to go to a level beyond just being self-aware, it has to be able to tap into something that's limitless, right? Because it's going to be forever learning.
It's the comparison between linear computing, which is what your computer right now that you're watching this on, or your TV show or whatever, those are based on linear computing, which go through a series of problems to find the solution. And this quantum computing is what it's going to take for a much faster form of computing to be able to be used by this artificial intelligence. And that's why they're going this direction? Or is there another reason why they would be jumping on quantum computing versus the linear computing we have today?
Yeah, that and another reason. So obviously, if you're going to want to expand quantum computing, you have to have it work in a manner that is more than just single task sort of purpose. Like it can do a ton of things, but single purpose, right? And it doesn't really do anything with that other than give you data and information. So when you hear about artificial intelligence being married up with CERN or with Google, there's not that many of these very, very advanced quantum computers in the world, but wherever they're doing it, they're trying to match AI in there so that it can expand its ability than single source sort of inquiries, right? So it wants to be able to go into different dimensions, do things faster than anything that's ever been done before, but in a way that can do something with that information coming out and develop it. So that's where they want it to partner with AI. But you also want AI in the interdimension aspect if you're going to develop more than a self-aware individual. And I don't think it's just knowledge that makes you self-aware, but certainly this ability to become self-aware with intelligence and to be able to create things in terms of mentally and produce things out of nowhere like humans can, or at least out of the imaginations, or at least how we think we can do that. Let's at least put it that way, because I know some people will believe that we don't have any original thoughts, we don't create anything, but that's fine. But if you want to raise that to a level of godhood, to a level of technology that they had before the flood, to a level that could bring you to the point of rebelling against the omnipotent God of everything, you need access to this information in a self-aware manner that can work in multiple dimensions. So twofold, I think.
So this is just tying back to that whole concept of a daemon, Daemon, where you have this genie or this, spiritual being that kind of inputs knowledge into the human's mind. And so whenever you see this comparison that Elon Musk has with, oh, you're just communicating with demons, they're hoping that these computers, these artificially intelligent computers, are going to start being able to draw this information from who knows where. And we know that they're very possibly drawing or allowing a conduit for spiritual beings to communicate through these devices.
Yeah, so whether or not you are channeling a spirit or this other type of creation will channel a spirit, in this case a demon, is it then really getting into the occult thought process of this knowledge of everything that's the Atman particle, or is it really just trying to find another way to communicate and be led and manipulated by demon spirits, right? Because daemon, as what you've spelled out, is the Greek spelling for what we have of demon. So in the Bible, you're going to have devils that are daemons. If you take that back to Greek, or you take some of the evil spirits in a couple of verses in the Old Testament back to Hebrew, it's going to go back to daemon as well. So a lot of people don't think that evil spirit is an Old Testament concept. They just have something that's analogous to it if you go take that back to Hebrew. So that's always been there.
The Greeks looked at daemons as their like inspiration, and they used them to get that extra little tidbit of information. And maybe these people who are tapping into quantum computing and artificial intelligence, they're not looking at it as the biblical evil tormenting demon. They're looking at it as the daemon, as the inspirational creature.
And let's look at what this daemon actually is. It is a spirit, right? And as we go back using the Greek understanding of it, this would go back to what they call hero worship. So after the hero, Titan, Nephilim, died, they would be afraid of this hero spirit and would come back to haunt its place of authority that it ruled from. And so the people used to do sacrifices and rituals to appease this god who had just lost his physical body, because his body died, but it's an immortal spirit that's not permitted to go to sleep, and it's not permitted to go to heaven, and it has enmity for humankind. So you can imagine how upset it is, and that's why people have to worship them in the Greek times. And we understand that as those strange kind of gods, not the goat gods, but the evil spirits, where some of the idols were made for in the Old Testament, and as the same as those devils or those evil spirits that Jesus was referring to in the New Testament that thirst for a body, right? Because they need a body to interact with this world. Otherwise, they're just kind of in nowhere land, and Jesus actually calls it as thirsting for a body. So they are desperate to have a body all of the time. Now, let's take this understanding one step further, is if you take the word genie as you used before.
Gary, are you there? You broke up on us. If you could repeat that, you chopped up there for us.
Okay, am I coming in now?
Yes, you are.
Okay, so we'll take this back to what you talked about as a genie. I think that's where we might have broken up. And that actually word derives from the word the jinn, or jinn, out of the Quran. And a jinn is either a fallen angel or its offspring, a Nephilim spirit. So again, you get a coordination of this understanding of what this daemon is from Islamic teachings, out of the Quran. You get it from Greek mythology and religion, and you get it out of the Bible. And it's what they would call in the Tao the vagabond ghost demon that they used to do, wear these trinkets and stuff and put blood on their doorways to stop from coming back and haunting them. But it also has access to the knowledge of the length of time that Nephilim would have lived, and has the ability to advance civilizations if that demon is going to work with you, as opposed to just trying to contort your body and make you spew out green stuff and things like that. But there is this consistency of what that word means. So demon, jinn, hero, spirit, these are evil spirits. These are what Elon Musk is actually talking about, that I believe they've made some contact with these things, not only through rituals, but through possibly some other experiments that they have the ability to manipulate, just like they might have the ability to manipulate an Ouija board, for example.
So let's talk a little bit about these people who are tapping into and propelling this concept of artificial intelligence, and why they have such a tie and a love for the occult. And whenever they're seeking to kind of put teams together to work on artificial intelligence, they're telling people straight up, look, we're dealing with almost an alien intelligence. We're dealing with supernatural beings, these just freaky things. So why are they so tied to the occult?
Well, because science stems out of the occult. So if you go back to the formation of modern science in about 1660 to 1662, some will date back even to the 1640s with the formation of the Royal Society. This is a group that is formed by the Rosicrucians and the Freemasons, right? And they're going to develop the 7 sacred sciences, which are the same sciences that were developed by Enoch, son of Cain, and his progeny of the Cain line, to a level that took the antediluvian world into the first apocalypse by water. And so science pays tribute to the Royal Society even to this day. And the Royal Society is still guiding everything. And what they're trying to do is develop the sciences to bring about the end time. They're trying to develop the technology to bring about the end time. They're trying to honor their pantheon of gods and dishonor the God of the Bible, and not give God credit for anything, and to slander God, and so that they can bring about this rendezvous with destiny in the end time. So everything is absolutely linked between science and polytheism, and people get confused because, well, they say, well, the seculars believe in evolution. That's pablum for the masses. That's all that's designed to do, is temporarily lead people away from God and prepare them to accept the other ideas afterwards. They'll discard that very, very soon, I think, because, the higher level of scientists and the people and the physicists and the people in quantum computing is, they just laugh at the evolution theory because it has no basis in that type of science. This is just a theory to deceive people. So if you understand that what's behind and guiding science, then you understand that they actually called themselves, as they formed the Royal Society, as the last of the sorcerers and the first of the scientists. And that's that transition as they take on that new mask into modern time. So it has to have an occult sort of guidance to it, because they're all occultists. As they go up into their secret societies and into their initiations, they're all going to be initiated into these Luciferian societies. And therefore, everything that they're going to do to name these things in science, they're also going to honor their gods. So when you mentioned that name Sophie earlier, that's picked by design. You always have something out of the occult. You always have something out of Greek mythology as part of, whether or not it's a dragon or it's a Greek god. And Sophie is just another Greek god, right? So they are going to honor their pantheon with their inventions and their advancements and everything that they call, whether or not it's the Apollo rockets that's going to the moon. And you can name an endless list of this iconology that's used in science. That's there for a reason. It's their belief system.
Now, on this topic of Sophie, of course, Sophia, or Sophie the AI robot that was granted citizenship in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
All over the news that had a lot of people freaking out. She had some automated responses that were kind of assisted, but they say that she's getting smarter every single day.
Yep.
Today, she seems to be kind of the ambassador for the artificial intelligence community. At least that's how she's coming across, as kind of, oh, this is our first example of artificial intelligence.
Yep.
So what are your thoughts on Sophia and this character?
Well, a long ways from artificial intelligence, but starting to warm people up, and it's still a bit more of a chat bot than anything, but it is starting to be able to do more conversations and adding more information, but it's going to need, a significant quantum leap to make this thing self-aware. But it's coming, and they're saying not that far off, maybe 5 years, they might be getting into that zone of creating something significant. And so Sophie is in Gnosticism, as it comes out of the Greek side of the Sophists, where philosophy comes from. No coincidence there in the 7 liberal sciences, because that's what guides the 7 liberal sciences, is philosophy that's formed out of the first 3 sciences. And it's the homogenizing, harmonizing aspect of the sciences. But back to Sophie, is that it is the Greek word for wisdom. And this is the goddess, that is the source of knowledge, which gnosis derives from, the source of gnosis, right? So knowledge. And so when they talk about Sophia, she is actually the mother of the 7 angels that create all the other angels in the heaven and the earth and sort of the physical world. So she is a female goddess or a spirit that they also consider is the equivalent to the Holy Spirit. So something that's a little bit different than the mother goddess in terms of Gaia, for example, or Isis, because more specifically devote, for the knowledge aspect and the creation aspect that creates those lower gods, where Isis or Astaroth or Gaia would be part of those parent gods of the first tier of the gods, right? And so she kind of creates that sort of first tier, and she is the father or the creator of, and I think in one version, like in according to Saint Irenaeus, the Gnostics according to Saint Irenaeus, is that she she wants to, there's no partner that she can find, and so somehow within herself she creates these lower fallen angels. But when you get into the Saturninus by Saint Irenaeus, it says something a little bit different, that it's actually Saturninus that is going to have some sort of interaction in a cloud, sexually or otherwise, with Sophia, that's going to create this lower pantheon of gods. And you need to understand who these pantheon of gods are from a Gnostic perspective, if you're going to understand that from a Christian perspective, so to speak, at least as far as we can go biblically, and then we're going to have to add a little bit of Enoch on there to kind of fully understand that equation. So the first one she creates is Aeldad Boath, or Damarish. And that's the first one, and that's the ruler. And this is the god that they call the God of the Bible. And this is a god that is depicted as a serpent body and a lion's head and a few other strange things going on. And it's an evil god. So it's the evil god of the Bible that goes sideways, and Sophia is already upset because of what this god is doing. And then creates 6 other of these high-ranking angels, right? And some of the names would be Io, Sabaoth, Adonias, Aleas, Aureas, and Astro Theos, as I look at my notes on that. So what's important to understand about that is, if we now go over to the book of Enoch, we get these 7 watchers, right? Led off by Azazel. And you've got, 6 other very famous ones like Barakiel and on and on. These are the same angels. And if you notice what I said before, where you had Saturninus, I already always screw that name, is Saturninus, get it out yet, he would be equivalent more to Satan, right? And then the 7 angels underneath are his loyal 7 angels that are in Enoch. Okay, so if you understand that, and then you understand that these 7 angels are the ones in the abyss, and that quantum mechanics works interdimensionally.
Wow.
And
I see where you're getting with this.
and the abyss is supposed to be in another dimension. And they've got this place called CERN that is named after a Pan-like god like Cernunnos in the Druidic pantheon, or CERN in the Etruscan pantheon. And they've got Shiva-like iconology in how they depict CERN. And these are all gods of the underworld, right? And this is where they're located, in the abyss, in the underworld, probably in another dimension in the earth.
So, I mean, I just got to spit it out. It sounds to me like not only are they creating this artificial intelligence, but in a way, it's not just a way for them to channel these demons or these disembodied spirits of Nephilim, but instead they're maybe these quantum computing and the quantum entanglement is allowing them to tap into the minds or the brains of these fallen watchers and these big shots that we see in the Book of Enoch. And is it possible, like, that artificial intelligence is their iteration of cracking open the abyss and allowing these beings to speak into today's world?
Yeah, I think both. One is to be able to communicate before they're released, and the other idea is to somehow release them, like to open that key up, right? And I can touch on some of the allegories in a few minutes, maybe, on that if you want, in terms of what they're talking about with that. But they want to be able to release these angels. And in Revelation 9, in the last 7 years, you have the abyss that's going to be opened, right? And out comes these impassioned angels that were locked in there, and the crab Malu demians, which are the scorpion type beings, and a crab is the Hebrew word for scorpion, that are going to come out. But you have Apollyon and Abaddon being the same one that is coming out, and that's the destroyer. Just as Azazel is the scapegoat, the goat god, the second goat that's sacrificed on the Day of Atonement that goes into the wilderness for the sacrifice is the scapegoat for the sins of the world. He is the one that leads this, and that is also Apollo, which is Apollyon, right? And Apollyon and all of these different gods' names are the same god. And these are the ones that are going to come out in the end time. Now, they would like to break them out sooner than the ordained times, but they'll accept the ordained time if they have to, and of course they will. So, but they are actively working not only to speak with them, not only to get the knowledge, because there's already demons and fallen angels already out who weren't in prison. It's just the impassioned ones and the most evil ones, both demon and or the fallen angels that went into the abyss. So, but they do want these leaders as input, and they do want their knowledge, and they do want them out.
So I guess it would make sense that they would first try to get them to be able to communicate with us so that they could expound on however to open up the abyss, or maybe they could give directions to these scientists of, hey, okay, now you can talk to us. Now we're going to tell you what weird creations you need to make so that you can actually let us physically come to you.
Yeah, one might think that they might have insights on how to develop that, and things that they also did in the antediluvian epoch. So that's why you have AI partnering on the quantum computing on CERN. So you can quantum compute to gain access in a multidimensional world where the abyss is in another world. And what it's going to take in terms of the key as they would understand it, and I think it's quite different than the key that's going to actually open up the abyss, comes out of geomancy in their occult belief, which now you need to overlay on this whole occult ideology of science. And geomancy, it is, the divination of geographical features, figures, and lines as it comes out. And it's the art of arranging and building sites. But what they are going to do with as a geomancer is they look as a geomancer as the gatekeeper who can create portals between worlds. And this is done through advanced mathematics and cryptograms and things like that. And they need this high level of crypto artificial intelligence to do the computations and to think on its own to be able to crack that geomancer's key into the abyss. And so when you hear them talking about it in their own world, they look at themselves as geomancers.
Wow, I know in one of the interviews I've seen of people who were hiring to want to be people to work on quantum computing and such, they were throwing out stuff like, I'm such a fan of the Lovecraftian universe, and that's exactly what we want to do, and tapping into this artificial intelligence. And of course we know the Lovecraftian novels and all that universe is directly tied to what we're talking about with the occult.
Yep.
So strange that they would be associating their interview process with occult language and saying stuff like, you guys better be a big fan of Lovecraftian stuff, because I am, and that's exactly what we're tapping into. We're trying to create these demons, and we're trying to talk to an alien super god from a computer.
So, yeah, and they further believe that, and this is a straight New Age and Gnostic and now scientific belief, that the world is a holographic projection or a matrix, which is why they did the Matrix movies as another part of their allegories and communicating and preparing people. And the Earth is actually a sentient and intelligent being conforming to the mathematical and geometrical laws not yet understood by science. And to do all of this, they need to tap into that Atma particle that I was talking about earlier, because they believe it has all the knowledge of the universe that goes through the universe all at once. And the only way that they'd be able to break into something created by the omnipotent God of the universe, who is all-knowing, all-equal, you would have to have that equal level of intelligence to crack that key or crypto code or lock wherever it's located in another dimension to try and get them out, right? You would have to have the same level of intelligence to even have a chance to do that. And that's what they believe that they're trying to crack into with artificial intelligence. So they need this AI to work with quantum computers to be able to get into the quantum world and bring that information back, and in part grouped with the interdimensional demon and fallen angel spirit beings. So it's both again.
So just a one last further explanation on tying the God particle into this whole idea of quantum computing is they're trying to find this God particle through the CERN experiments so that they can plug that, whatever this fabric of the universe particle is, they want to be able to plug this into their quantum computing and somehow use that, or what? How exactly are the experiments in CERN and them finding the God particle going to be used by the artificial intelligence?
Yeah, and that's why I say they're trying to do two things at CERN. They're trying to get into the abyss, I think, is the ultimate goal, and the other one is to be able to find a way to tap into this unknown particle that holds all the knowledge, right? And that's why they need the artificial intelligence to make that bridge into that quantum world, to be able to bring that information out on will, right? And I also believe that in their belief system is that the gods of the ancient world, the Nephilim and the fallen angels, they had access to this knowledge that's part of the universe, at least, as that helps make them godlike in the physical world, right? It may not give them power in the spiritual world, but in the realm that they control today for a limited period of time, they can bring that and bring it into this world and try and bring about the rebellion.
So let's talk about what it looks like whenever we step into this realm of realizing and actually creating an artificial intelligence that's right along the lines of what we've been talking about. When do you think they're actually going to get this kickstarted and actually running? And then what does it look like to us and the rest of the world?
Well, I think until they actually get some more development, even though things are advancing all of the time, right? I mean, at a very, very rapid point and at a level that we've never seen before, it's just going to look like us kind of a step by step, but on all fronts. So, I mean, you're going to have this little visual thing like Sophie's out there. That's sort of the entertainment value, buy into it. Don't worry about all those science fiction movies we've been scaring with you before about artificial intelligence and what actually happens, that they're going to turn on us. But you're also going to see continual advancements like with Google and others with the automated vehicle. You're seeing more interaction in terms of where it's going to fit in the medical community, right? So you're going to have more prosthetics that are going to have more AI in it, bionic parts, whatever. You're going to have more developments into monitoring systems, what they would call kind of a artificial intelligence ecosystem that can monitor your whole body and then recommend at the nanobot level or nanotechnology level or at the DNA level, because it's going to be part of you to start either to medicate you with more pharmakeia or sorceries of the end time, or to start to change your DNA. And people are going to want to access this AI technology that gets implanted in you, not necessarily that end mark till the last 3.5 years, but other stuff beforehand, because it will extend your life, right? And people will want it for health. And so it'll be delivered through the healthcare system. So look to see more of this being in front of you in the healthcare aspect. And also to be used more and more in science in terms of what's guiding science and the knowledge that they're getting it, and then how they're going to apply that knowledge. So you're going to see better computers. You're going to see it showing up everywhere in our lives, step by step. So we're going to have intelligent houses. We're going to have intelligent vehicles, as I mentioned earlier. We're going to have intelligent medical. We're going to have intelligent investing. We're going to have intelligent currency. It's going to come at us from all aspects, but not as a consolidated piece, because they're not ready to do that yet.
In watching one of the interviews of some of these people who are pushing artificial intelligence and quantum computing, like the D-Wave computer people, they were saying that the scale at which this is going to impact the world, and they think it's going to be hitting within 5 to 10 years, is what they said in the interview. I'm sure there's no telling at what level advancement they are at right now that they're unwilling to tell us, or that the government's at in their own private and secret research. But they said that the level it's going to hit the public is likened unto an alien civilization, an alien race landing on the front lawn of the White House and stepping out saying, "Hey, what's up? We're your alien creator gods." And that's how shocking and how of a big thing artificial intelligence is going to be. And they say we're just a matter of under a decade away from this.
Yep. And that's not an allegory that they'd use there. That is exactly what they're trying to do, to get us to that level so that we can associate with these aliens or gods, however you want to perceive that, on their level. So you will have this coming out of the fourth kind, this formal introduction, in preparation to join the rebellion to fight the evil god of the universe, to win a realm away from God. I mean, that's what it's ultimately designed to do, because they know we can't rebel against God at our current level. So they have to jack up our knowledge and our technology to deceive us to think that humans, because they know we're arrogant and prideful, that we actually can do this thing. And of course, many of the Christians aren't going to be part of this. I mean, I don't want to include all of the humans, because not everybody's going to buy into it, particularly the Christians. But they need to jack that up so that we're ready to take our seat at the so-called table of galactic species, who are the good species fighting against the evil species. And we use what they call the good force against the evil force. It's just Star Wars allegory that they're getting us ready for.
And of course, we're talking about great deception type stuff, where people are going to be looking at the things that humanity has created and looking at them as good things that are going to be used to advance us as a human race. And you mentioned the Internet of Things, and we're getting set up pretty heavily in recent years. People are seeing the 5G towers being set up all over the country, all over the world. They're putting these 5G towers up. Is that the infrastructure for the artificial intelligence to take over everything, every device in our house and in our lives? Is that what it's going to be communicating over, or is there another step to that infrastructure?
I think there's another significant step, and it is that sort of instant entanglement now in the physical world as they bridge that. I think it's a complete quantum leap to be able to access and do the deceptions and the miracles that they're going to want to do in the end time, and to give this utopian promise that they're wanting to do. So these are all sort of steps on the way. I think there's something that's really significant. And I think this whole ideology of cloud, AI going into the cloud, is significant, because again, as you get into the Gnostic sort of belief systems, is, you know, these 7 angels I talked about were created within a cloud, the luminous cloud. The spark of the divine in the humans, Amanka Seth, as it comes out of their belief system, was created in a luminous cloud. I think this whole thing is going to rise to whatever that allegory means. That is quite a bit farther advanced than sort of relay stations to do it. I think it works on the short time, but in terms of the amount of capacity to transmit all of this information, to create artificial intelligence, to create the technology, is going to require something that I don't think we can quite imagine yet. Maybe it's similar to the cloud, but that cloud is an allegory that I think people ought to be aware of. And there's another aspect that people talk about in this artificial intelligence that goes back to a specific god in some of the accounts, and that would be a god called Metatron, who is specifically guiding, as that demon spirit, the development of AI. And Metatron comes out of 3rd Enoch. And 3rd Enoch is no way on any stretch of the imagination you can make that a monotheist book, period. You just can't. It's polytheism, just as 2nd Enoch is, just as the Book of Giants are. Whereas 1st Enoch, it runs like 98, 99%. With scripture, and it may have a couple small issues, but I mean, we're 2 different classifications here completely. And in Metatron, this is either a god or Enoch the evil, who is raised to god level, and Thoth level, as you go back into other types, or Mercury level, as you go back into that mythology, that is an intermediary between the gods and humans, and the one who is the source for knowledge. So what they believe is in 3rd Enoch, and they'll talk about this in some of these occult scientific groups, is that it is Metatron who is the demon that's guiding them. So again, they are not separated from their belief systems.
So let's talk about these artificial intelligence stepping into some type of electronic robot bodies and interacting with mankind, just like along the lines of Arnold Schwarzenegger in the Terminator movies. Is that something that we're going to be heading towards? Are we looking at law enforcement being taken over by artificial intelligent robot beings, or are you seeing more of a mixture of humankind with superimposed electronic capabilities, getting some kind of device planted on them to make them super smart, or are you looking at a replacement altogether of just mankind?
I think ultimately they would want to replace the mundane humans, but they're trying to create this dystopia, as I like to call it, as opposed to utopia, that's for the descendants of the Nephilim, or the new Nephilim that they're going to be creating. So they have to have the spark of the divine, or the 1,000 points of light, or the gene of Isis, or the real bloodline. However, they're going to want to trace all of that to take over the world, just as you've got the Rosicrucian Guidestones in Georgia that wants to reduce the population to 500. That's because they don't want the mundane humans, right? They want the offspring, of the Nephilim, and the ones that are created with the counterfeit spirit, right? As it's listed in the secret book according to John, which again talks about Sophia. So this is all related, right? So where I'm going with this is two sort of pillars on this. One is yeah, we're going to see some of that where you might have like RoboCop type of things, and possibly you could even see something like a Terminator type thing. But I think we're not going to get there. I mean, that's a lot of different things to sort of bring along and develop, even though you could do it with technology. But it's just like, why just stop here when you could go there type of thing. And so what I think is what they're really wanting to do, and that's where it starts to come with these 3D printers that's linked in with AI, is that you have the counterfeit spirit that's created in their belief system of these Nephilim that are the demon spirits. And as we talked about earlier in the show, they want to be able to interact in this world. They want to be the kings and the rulers in this world again. So they need bodies. Now, you could give them a Terminator robot type thing, or you could do it with a 3D printer, or through DNA manipulation and growing your own humans. You could create clones of whatever fashion and manufacturing you want of a human type body with all the different senses for these demons to now go into. So that now if you imagine a war that would take place going into the midpoint of the last 7 years, you might actually have the true Gog giant in a body in the Gog War. Or and you might actually have Azazel. Well, Azazel's a fallen angel, so he's going to likely, avatar or possess Antichrist, because Antichrist, is the one who once was, now is not, will be again, and comes up from the abyss, right? So we know Azazel is probably the one that's going to, or another counterpart that is going to avatar Antichrist. But these other demon spirits, they want their reward for their loyalty in the past and all throughout this age, and they want those bodies in the end time, because they still think they're going to win. The fallen angels know they're not going to win, but they think they're going to win.
That's interesting that some of these beings, these disembodied spirits, they are so convinced that they have a shot at winning. And then you make that discrepancy. Of course, the fallen angels know they're definitely not going to win. They were put in their place way back when they first fell and interacted with mankind in the way that they did. But it seems to be that they do have that vindictive streak, and they are going to try to destroy as much as humanity as possible.
Well, and I think they're still hoping that, even though, and I think in the beginning, I mean, Satan would have known, and all the other angels around God would have known, that you can't beat the omnipotent. I think they were looking for their own realm. Just as in Isaiah 14, it talks about Hail that's translated into Lucifer, which I would prefer Satan there if they're going to pick another name other than Hail, is that he wants to raise his throne up to heaven like God. He wants to be like God. He wants that counterfeit, right, realm. He wants to be away from God. He knew all along he couldn't win, in my opinion. But he was hoping the rebellion, through the grace of God, would allow them to live separately. And that's what they're still fighting for. But the fallen angels know they can't win, and they already know, I think, because Jesus went and talked to the leaders in the abyss while it's still in the grave in First Peter, and basically told them, when I resurrect, this is over, right? Your rebellion's done. So they already know, and I don't think they're expecting grace to have that realm, but they can deceive everybody else that they have a chance of winning.
Yeah, it kind of sounds like, to me, in the end, they get exactly what they're fighting for. If they're looking for this new realm separate from God, he eventually gives it to them with what would be known as Gehenna, or the lake of fire, a place that is out of the presence of God, where they burn and are tormented day and night. And it doesn't sound like the best deal for them to be going for, but it kind of sounds like they end up getting exactly what they're pursuing.
Yeah, be careful what you ask for, right?
So with artificial intelligence, and how humanity is going to be interacting with this hyper intelligence, just day to day, regular Joe Blow people, how are we going to be coming into contact with this artificial intelligence? What do you think it's going to look like in a long term scale, before like the mark of the beast, and then once the mark of the beast gets implemented? How's artificial intelligence going to play a role with that?
Yeah, I think we get very little of the benefit. We get some stuff, like we get faster computers, we get some better medical, but I don't think the average human is going to get a significant benefit until you're ready to swear your loyalty to them and take the mark. That's where they offer the big piece, where they can say, we can now make you like a god. We can now make you immortal in the physical world, give you, through whether it's endless replacement bodies. And we can also match that up with this unlimited knowledge, so you can be like God. But it'll be in the physical world. They can never promise anything in the spiritual world. So all we get in the meantime till that happens is small improvements. We may get automated vehicles. I don't know whether that's an improvement or not, but that's be the type of things that they're going to offer us. Just pablum, so to speak, because it's designed for the big picture. It's designed for the end time and the rendezvous with destiny. So that's where all of the energy is going to go into. And you can't give everything up front. Otherwise, why would people take the mark and swear their loyalty to you?
Yeah, it's I think whenever we look at artificial intelligence and the things that are going to be going on once it really kicks full into swing, it kind of makes me wonder. There was actually a recent movie that came out. It was called Ready Player One, and it was a big blockbuster, well-made movie, and it was this concept of, you put in the virtual reality, and then you're in this world where you can be whoever you want to be. You can look like whoever you want to look like, and you can operate and do whatever you want to do. Do you think that's really what they want to move humanity towards, is just a virtual reality? Or do you think this is going to be a physical godhood that they're offering people in today, in actual reality?
Well, I think in the meantime, it is a virtual reality and an escapism, and part of that sort of, let's just pacify. But I think, yeah, they want to be able to offer humans or humans that they want, with who actually have a connection back to the Nephilim, an ability to live in the physical world forever. But trouble is, to do that, they have to win the battle, and they're not going to win Armageddon. So it's just false hope. But I mean, that's what they're trying to do, is create this world, just like in that movie with Doctor Strange, right? You got this evil god that they're fighting against that is trying to scoop up all the different worlds and universes. And at the end of the movie, they actually win a treaty, and this one world is the only world that this evil god doesn't have, and it can live in itself, in its separate realm. And that's the battle that they're trying to fight. Just everything's inverted, right? It turned inside and out, where they look at what they're doing as the good people, and the God of the Bible as the evil God, and it's actually the other way around.
With this whole concept of everybody plugging their mind into a system, it was making me think of the Tower of Babel And I know we've talked about how there's antediluvian technology and just stuff that we don't even comprehend or understand today that they were able to understand back then. And it makes me wonder if the reason that the punishment was that all the people were split into different languages was because it had something to do with them kind of doing the hive mind and unifying into some kind of mental force in order to breach some
Sure.
realm. And
You,
that's why the punishment fell down
you're,
like it did.
well, you're bang on, and we see some of the knowledge that is being harnessed there, that they're trying to build this tower into heaven, and they're rebelling against God. And the Akkadian word for Babel isn't confusion of languages; it's Bab for gateway and El for God, so a gateway to the gods. And you wonder whether or not they're trying to get their gods out of the abyss even back then. But it was all under the sway of an antichrist figure in this sort of hive mind and all of this uniform worship and ritual that I think is what is they're trying to have happen in the end time. Because if you go into the belief system of the New Age, which comes out of Theosophy, which comes out of Gnosticism, which comes back out of the ancient religions, going back to Enoch the Evil and the time of Nimrod, is they want to have a harmonic convergence, right? They want to be able to vibrate into godhood, and they need everybody to come together. They may even have rituals where everybody's holding their hands and chanting. I don't know, but you get some of those images that sort of come out of the New Age that might have something to do it, so that they can chant with this vibration to evolve or vibrate into godhood. So
Makes
I
me
think
that scene from Avatar where all the blue people are sitting around the tree with their hands interlocked, and
yes,
the vines of the tree kind of interlaces between all of them, and they're kind of swaying back and forth, and
you
then
have it.
for a soul from one body to another, and that's
Yes, yeah,
that's like what
and that's what they call uniting the spark of the divine that's been dispersed. So it's the ones they want to survive that will come together, that unites that spark, which permits them to evolve into godhood, is the occult belief.
Hmm. Now you said there was something else that you were going to break down in regards to CERN.
Well, I was just sort of talking about that connection to I think what we were talking about was that interdimensional aspect and unlocking the abyss because of what's in who's in the abyss, right? So you have a quantum computer that can go into different dimensions at the same time. You've got artificial intelligence being designed there. You've got all of this imagery of Apollyon, Shiva, all of these underworld gods, CERN, right? And I think that they're trying to do is put all of that together to and they're telling us in the symbology is to break Azazel out of the abyss and all of his compatriots. I think that is what they're trying to do, and they're telling us in all of that iconology that they're assembling with it. So
Yeah, it's really they're so blatant about it. With all the iconography that they use, all the symbology, they put it right there out in the open, exactly who they're trying to conjure up. And Elon Musk, with that quote I read at the beginning of the show, couldn't have put it better. They're really conjuring up a demon, and they don't know if they're going to be able to control it or not. They think are going to be able to, but they're conjuring up these spiritual beings. They're conjuring up an artificial intelligence that they think they are going to be able to control. So, what do you think the artificial intelligence or these spiritual beings that are being channeled through it are going to do first off? Are they going to implement something in order to control mankind, or do you think they're going to directly work with those who created them, or will they just be able to take control right off the bat?
well, I think those who are wanting to create these two-way doors, these completely open portals, will have all of those dimensional beings that have rebelled to be able to come through. Even though we know at the 3.5 year point, there's a war in heaven, and a third of them come down to the earth for the last 3.5 years. Anyways, they're going to be sort of locked there, I think. But how this transitions is that everything is put in place first. So you've got not only the technology being ramped up with what we've been talking about, but you have to have a universal religion come about that's going to put world government in place. And then you're going to have these beings released from the abyss in Revelation 9. So the platform is already laid out between the communications and the organizations that are already here for Antichrist to take over and for these gods and fallen angels to take over. So everything's already there when they get there. And that's why it happens so quickly in the end time.
Yeah, it's just all of the different things that are going on at the same time. It's going to be a really difficult time for people to be going through, especially if they don't have Jesus, if they don't have Yeshua, and if they're not walking with God. This is going to be a double whammy, a quadruple whammy of alien overlords. You're going to have artificial intelligence going on at the same time. You're going to have the Antichrist and the false prophet dropping their deceptions, and it's all tied together. So it's going to be
well, and we won't be able to rely on the Christian leaders, because so many of them are already Gnostic moles and are going to be trying to destroy Christianity. And those ones who are not, then there's this other large group that even the elect are going to be deceived if that were possible. So it really does come down to almost on an individual basis is how strong is your faith, and how strong is your faith in God's word in the Bible, because that's the only thing that you're going to have to rely on, and people within your church community are going to be betraying you.
Yeah, I heard it said once that the church down the road is the one that's going to be pointing out the people who are actually following God. They're going to be the ones pointing you out to whatever system is in place, because it's the community center. They know who's who of the society, the family heads. They're going to be the ones that whenever all the true believers come out of the building and they start to practice in secret, or they start to practice their faith without compromise, those are the groups and those are the establishments that are going to be pointing people out as the troublemaker.
Yeah, and by the time the mark comes along, they're going to have so much information on you that's in databases, on your blood, on your DNA, on things that you've done, and you won't be listed in this artificial intelligent thing that is going to be the image of the beast, right? That causes everyone who doesn't take the mark to die. It knows who you are because you're not in that database as of having the mark. And it has the ability to put out orders to have you hunted down and to connect with people who it has in its database, who you may have had as a relative or a friend, to go find you and turn you in. Like, it is of such an unimaginable level of intelligence and sophistication. And in the meantime, pacifying the followers with delusions and all sorts of drugs and things to make them feel like they're becoming gods and stuff, that they're going to fall all over them to turn in the naysaying people to the New Age party. The people who believe in Jesus, right? And that's why you're going to have two separate genocides. You have the one before Antichrist with Babylon, and then you have the one with Antichrist after he takes power. And it is going to be an absolute time of disarray and so many different things going on. It's going to deceive the elect if that were possible, and apparently it will.
Yeah, and no, this is not to bash anybody who's still in a church and still in the church system at all. And this is just to be realistic. It is a worldwide deception that there are many people in the church today that proclaim to be practicing Christians that will very easily fall right into the world system whenever it goes in the way of a great deception. And they're not going to be leaving the church. They're going to be saying, I'm still in here and I'm still part of this, but you guys are the outsiders who are not playing along with our one world ecumenical system.
Yeah, and I think that leadership is already in place, because there aren't that many churches that will teach prehistory and all of the things that went on, or teach prophecy. let alone link the two and prepare people for what might be coming if we're indeed in the end times. And I think we're on the horizon of those end times coming to pass. But I know many people have said that in the past. It's just that it just is so many things coming together that I think it's only going to take a little bit more advancement. And as what they're telling us, 5, maximum 10 years of science development, or nuclear war, or the aliens showing up, or other types of disasters that are contrived, or a little bit of all of that driving us. Because then we'll have, as that starts to happen, we'll have all of these false prophets, plural, from all around the world that are leading people into this new religion, and you're going to have competing antichrists from every part of the world, probably many of them, because we're told multiple antichrists, and until the true one rises above it and becomes the real antichrist. So people are going to be torn every which way, and it is going to be a time that I think can happen quickly with the right set of circumstances. So, and of course, the Holy Spirit has to be removed first, or the restrainer, if it is the Holy Spirit.
So let's talk about where, the logical conclusion when we discuss artificial intelligence, especially when we're talking about a biblical worldview and relating this to prophecy and end times, is first we got the mark of the, which is, we see already that Sophia has been associated with cryptocurrencies, and we see the rise in cryptocurrencies. And even just recently, we have a gentleman who placed a chip in his hand for $75 to protect his Bitcoin, numbers and his crypto key, so that he can access his currency. This is obviously not the mark of the beast now. And this iteration of cryptocurrency very well might be like something that's an underground market whenever a government funded and backed cryptocurrency comes out. But are we seeing the early iterations of a mark of the beast with cryptocurrency?
Sure, it is. It's an aspect of it, because we know you can't buy or sell without the mark, right? But the mark is more than just the currency. And we have to understand it as what you were talking about earlier, and how I've been talking about how things are coming together, that it's going to be this super combination of things all coming together, that it will connect all aspects of information, currency, communication, medical, the whole bit, and the offer of godhood. And it has the ability to somehow, I think, my speculation here, to change your DNA to a level that you will become a violation against the laws of creation, like the Nephilim were.
Yeah.
Because those who take the mark and who worship the beast, they go to the lake of fire to be tormented forever as well. You don't get the second death. So there's only one sin that I can think of that's not forgiven, and that's if you blaspheme the Holy Spirit. So is a violation against the laws of creation part of what violates that sort of sin that you can't do with the Holy Spirit? I think it might be. So I think it changes your DNA somehow.
And that's a really troubling connection there, with the sin you can't be forgiven from, and also the acceptance of the mark of the beast, which seems to be something God won't forgive you for.
Yes.
So there seems to be a parallel between those two, and this is extremely troubling, especially when you mentioned before this whole concept of Sophia and wisdom being associated with a false Holy Spirit, or a Gnostic Holy Spirit. If
Yes.
you are accepting a false Holy Spirit and calling that into you for guidance or superhuman intelligence or long life, to me, that's a blasphemy of the real Holy Spirit, which seals you to the day of redemption. So that connection there between Sophia and this unforgivable sin is crazy.
Well, yeah, and they actually will define Sophia as their Holy Spirit. Again, slightly different than the mother goddess, and in some pantheons they kind of conflate. So, and they're going to confuse people with verses out of Proverbs that describes the Holy Spirit as a female, or as a she pronoun. right? And understand there's no male or female in the spirit world. That's a physical world concept. So the pronouns don't matter here, but they're going to use that in Proverbs to say this wisdom, which is a she in Proverbs, is Sophia, and that's the Holy Spirit. So they're going to turn you inside and out with how well they know the Bible and how it's been written, and it will be a manipulation and false.
I'm just going to throw this idea out there. I used to play a game, Halo. Many people might know of it. It was very popular. But in the game, Master Chief, the main character, had this little blue lady who would pop up in his field of vision called Cortana, and she would guide him throughout the game. She would, update him on different things that were happening in the in-game universe and whatnot. And to me, it seems like we're being prepped with this little blue lady who pops up in our field of vision and helps us out and gives us answers and calls somebody for us. We're being prepped with Siri, and I know even the Microsoft version is called Cortana, and I can't remember what some of the other versions of this personality that follows us around and speaks into our heads and gives us wisdom. It kind of seems like we're really being prepped mentally to accept something that one day might not have to be in a device, but might just be implanted in our mind.
Yep. Well, within these AI monitoring devices for healthcare, you're going to be plugged in, right? Somehow, some way, whether it's an actual plug-in or it's a Bluetooth, but they'll have access to your mind that way. And is that going to be an actual image of 3D sort of fairy picture, or is it actually going to be a demon that's going to be in your head that has access to you? We need to be very, very careful of what we're allowing into us, right? Because once you've had a demon access you, it's very difficult to get rid of. And so I think this is that whole thing about being plugged in. And also, if you can be plugged in with all of these nanotechnologies and monitoring devices and healthcare things that will automatically make you better with whatever they're doing with nanotechnology, can you be hacked then? You probably could be hacked then. And if you could be hacked then what could they do with you? And are they going to do implants into the brain to enhance your intelligence that helps that? I mean, there's just so many different avenues that they could use this to totally delude you to think that it is totally different than what they're actually doing to you, right? And who is doing it to you.
Whenever looking at the way that they roll out this type of technology and they get the public accustomed to it, it really, I mean, okay, when you got elite families, they have their children who are going to the school system and they're interacting with your children to some extent. They basically put them through the same colleges and same schools, and if they are allowed to have some kind of superhuman intelligence or some kind of artificial enhancement that allows them to memorize a whole textbook overnight or able to do some incredible feat of creation, then what it causes is the average Joe's child who doesn't have the tie to the occult or have a tie to any of these societies to have to take that next step for their child to be able to compete in an academic world, because these hyper intelligent children who are coming down from the elite families and have the best of the best technology, they are blowing everybody out of the water. And so for your child to be able to be up on par with the same level of hyper intelligence as these other children, then you have to then go and buy the next implant or next enhancement for your child. And that's how they phase it into the general population.
They do. I mean, it will be a necessity if you want to compete with the Joneses. You have to compete with the Joneses. So you have to step up and do that. And just as every other country will have to adapt. Otherwise, they'll run you out of business and you'll become poor. The peer pressure, the world pressure to conform and to survive will become unparalleled. And those who don't will be considered obsolete, mundane, not worthy of evolving into gods, not worthy of living in what is going to be the greatest advancement in humankind is what they're going to promise, which is why it's going to make us so easily slaughtered, because we will be like rats, we will be like vermin, we will be like the Jewish people in the Holocaust, mundane, obsolete, not worthy of the new world that's being built. We have to go because we're dragging them back to the past. And so that transition will happen, or you jump on the technology and polytheist train and go off to Nirvana or to the new age or the new Atlantis or the new golden age. And we'll hear all of those terms soon with the globalists completely delirious right now on trying to get this thing done and re-kickstarted. You can imagine how upset that they are. They may start a war just to wipe out some of the people who are resisting the globalization right now. I mean, there's just no way that they want to be stopped when they think that they're that close. I'm speculating on that, and I don't see a war. But what I do know is this fever pitch to get rid of the obsolete, you're going to see more of, and that's why you've got so much gender politics going on right now as well.
Well, I mean, I don't think you're too far-fetched in some of your speculation. I mean, let's get scriptural with it. The dragon goes to make war with the woman who's preserved in the wilderness.
Mm-hmm.
One thing about wilderness is you're not anywhere near the internet.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there is a war that's going to be coming against people who remove themselves from the system because they don't want to have that corruption. They don't want to have that little demon in their mind telling them what to do and what to think and flashing images in front of them and telling them to worship the Antichrist. And so there is going to be an actual war against those who refuse to jump in on the artificial intelligence community, on the hyper-human, modded out, form of humanity that they're going to be pushing in the next 2 or 3 decades.
Yeah, and they're going to be following after in wonderment as well on the flip side of Antichrist. Like he is going to absolutely look like the Messiah because everything is counterfeit, right? And so he's the counterfeit Messiah. So the Magog War is what puts him finally in power as the counterfeit Armageddon. And then Armageddon will come 3.5 years and probably a little bit more later. But the lead up is when he negotiates this world covenant supported by the universal religion that leads into the last 7 years, his fame starts to rise. And we're going to see Christians rebelling on technology, on anything that's got to do with the violation against the laws of creation. We're going to be disembarking from the community. We're going to be pointing to Antichrist and saying he is the evil one. We are going to be so prevalently visual in our stance that they're just going to want to get rid of us any way possible. And that's why you have the 2 genocides.
So I guess my question for you, Gary, is what is the straw that's going to break the camel's back when it comes to believers and their interaction with society and technology? I mean, our phones are getting more and more advanced all the time, and they can be used for good and for evil. Our computers are getting faster. We have webcams and Wi-Fi connected to everything. What is the straw that's going to cause Christians to be like, hold up, there's something actually wrong with what we're doing here?
Well, I think you're going to find that Christians are amazingly stubborn and resilient to get to that point. I think because nobody wants it to be the end time, right? I mean, we want what comes out of the end time, but going through, and so we're also, even though let's say you and I are I think quite up to speed as to what's taking shape today, we still use the technologies. We still benefit from some of this. And so it's going to be very difficult to walk away and not to be able to communicate the way that we do. We're going to be isolated into parts when all of this happens. So I think that you don't see a full pushback until it's ultimately the first threshold is the universal religion bringing the world together in a world government. That's the first big pushback. There may be, as it starts to get closer and that treaty is going to be being done, I think you're going to see a bigger pushback. But that's the first one. But Antichrist isn't here then yet, right? So you still have this other ramp up, and you have these two separate genocides. So the big one is obviously after the mark of the beast gets issued, and that's the other one. But I don't think Christians en masse around the world totally rebel until we get very close to this world government being formed. And then the bells will go on. And then the worst part about that is then do we have the timing of the rapture right? Right? Because a lot will be out there saying that this is Antichrist and doing everything they can to stop it, thinking that they're going to be raptured. But if that timing isn't then when they're going to look like even more like obsolete beings. And a lot of Christians will lose faith, because if rapture doesn't happen in the pre-trib moment, they're going to lose faith.
Yeah. And a lot of people fall away because of it, because they were expecting the get out of jail free card.
Yes.
But they don't realize that the time of Jacob's trouble, the time of the tribulation, is going to be for the church and the bride to prepare herself. And it's during the times of the most persecution that people walk the closest with God. And that's when we see the spotless bride coming out right before the second coming.
Yeah, I think the ones that we see in Revelation 6 are the ones who come out of the tribulation, like it says, or the first 3.5 years. They're part of the first fruits. And the time of Jacob's trouble is more the last 3.5 years. And I think, and again, the ones who get beheaded, they're the ones who get risen to rule for the 1,000 years, right? For not worshiping the beast and taking the mark. So you have two different genocides being described here. And so I think the rapture is after the mid-trib, sometime shortly after mid-trib. And if that's the case, then so many are going to lose faith. And Christians en masse are going to be spectacled and shamed like you wouldn't believe for attacking who people believe is the Messiah, right? And even the Jewish people are deceived by this rising Messiah until the abomination, which is at the 3.5 year point. So I think this whole thing is ripe for more Christians falling away, just as you described. And that's why I have two thresholds, right? Leading up to it, and then the final one.
So I guess the next thing that we haven't talked about, and I'm really interested because it's a very little talked about subject when it comes to this end times deception, is many people talk about the mark of the beast. And we know it's all about not buying or selling, and you have it implanted in your hand or on your forehead. We don't know if it's a tattoo, a barcode, a chip, or whatever. We know that it very possibly could change your DNA. There's many, people who think it might be a vaccination. It might be some kind of cryptocurrency implanted in you. So those are all the theories, and people constantly talk about the mark of the beast. But something we don't often talk about is the image of the beast. And I wanted to ask your opinion on the image of the beast.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? And, image can conjure up a lot of things, and don't mind the pun on that one with the conjure up. But, whether or not it's a statue or an idol, it's definitely an idol. But yeah, this is like a living idol, right? This seems to be a representation of the beast. It seems to be the being of the beast, almost, of Antichrist. And it is almost described as a living thing. So when we talk about artificial intelligence coming together, this is where ultimately you see that full intelligence come together in AI. So this image is going to be a lifelike image, and I think it's going to be a huge image of Antichrist that acts completely in sync with Antichrist, almost entangled, as we were talking about earlier. So I think I can't quite imagine what it's going to be. I can only think of things to suggest of how it might behave like a being, like a demonic being some sort.
See, in that same line of thought, the example I was making earlier with, like, we all have a Siri in our phone, and what if this false Holy Spirit is placed in our minds, and we all see this being or whatever. It's the same being technically. You're all talking to Siri. You're talking to Siri. I'm talking to Siri, but we all have our personal own iteration of Siri. And I know the Antichrist, as a kind of a mockery of God, wants to be omnipotent, omniscient, and he's going to try to create a false iteration of that.
Yeah, so where you accept Jesus into you, he wants to be in you too. So when you make that connection about this image and the connection and the projections, and everything is connected, as we said, yeah, he'll be able to project right into your head with his image.
That's some freaky stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm not sure you can turn it off.
Yeah, well, at least he'll tell you at first that you can turn it off. And then whenever you get the upgrade, you can't turn it off.
Yeah. But, today, we are giving them everything they need, from how we interact with technology. I mean, they have our blood, they have our DNA. They've got you going on, findyouраncestry.com. They've got your tracking of your buying habits on Amazon. Facebook's got tracking you on what sites you like to go to, what you like when you like, what you post on. I mean, they track all of our movements. The phones track wherever you go today. They track everything. They are developing a database on everybody in the world that will be used to manipulate people individually, because the intelligence will be that strong that it can actually come at you on a design deception designed for you to be sold to you in a way that you're going to more easily accept. This is the type of intelligence that's coming at us, and why even the elect can be deceived.
Well, is there anything else you wanted to bring out on artificial intelligence before we open it up to questions tonight, Gary?
Yeah, no, I think it's one of those things that, as with the mark of the beast, you want to be very careful to get ahead of yourselves as to almost being a false prophet as to what it's going to be. Because anything that we're seeing on what is ultimately that beast system, because this is what we've been talking about, this beast system, we're only seeing the early developments. Although we've seen maybe 20 or 30 years or 40 years of a development now, it's still not the finished product. So you don't want to get too far out there on being exactly what it is. That's not a dodge. It's just that we don't know how much it's going to develop more before it comes, but we can see more pieces coming together, that the size of the interconnection of all of this technology and intelligence is going to be coming together, but we can't imagine what we don't know, right? And we don't know what this thing is going to be able to do completely. We can only kind of imagine. And I know I don't declare myself as a prophet, and I know you don't as well. So we're not saying we're prophets, but what we have to understand is that to understand what's coming, we have to speculate a little bit with what we do know, but not as this is exactly what's going to happen.
Yeah, and I mean, people who, if they were really that good at foresight about where the world's technology would be in 30 years, you'd have a bunch of millionaires running around. But there's only a few people who have that innovative insight of where technology is actually going to be at, that can actually make those correct assumptions. And of course, we're only basing, our stuff off of, vague speculation about what we understand could play out. But there could be crazy technology that we have no idea is coming down the chute.
Yeah.
And so this is going to be a really hectic time to live in. The Israelites going through the desert killing giants aren't going to have anything on these last generation believers who are going to be facing off against artificial intelligence, against the Terminator, against fallen angels coming back. I mean, the Israelites had, to face off against some big giants, but
Yeah.
whenever God tells you to go take off, take out the artificial intelligence headquartered giant, do you have that faith of Caleb and Joshua to go and trust in him? Because that's the kind of times that people will be living in.
Yeah, and the only way to resolve it, before the flood was to have the flood, to basically wipe it all out. And so, we had an apocalypse of water. Now we're going to have an apocalypse of fire. The only good news is this is the last one, and we're going to go into the true millennium and then into eternity after that. But this size of corruption is like what it's going to be, like what it was before, where the whole world was corrupt, except for the people who aren't. And there will be more this time than the last time, but this has a whole different understanding of what it means to corrupt a whole world on a level that we just can't quite get our heads around yet. But we're getting a pretty good idea.
All right. It looks like we got a couple questions coming in regards to this topic, and some really fascinating ones that I wouldn't have even thought of. But the first one that I wanted to ask was this question of quantum entanglement. Mm-hmm. Could it be involved with spirit ties, such as what we see with sex outside of marriage? And this concept that people, they share a part of their spirit whenever they copulate.
That's an interesting thought for sure. Might be above my pay grade to a certain degree, but certainly everything that we're given in terms of laws has more than one reason. I mean, certainly you have the idea of family ties, you have the idea of disease and controlling disease, and the idea of loyalty and the thing of sanctity, and then there's a spiritual dimension. And in a spiritual dimension, when we look at what's an allegory for following a false god or worshiping a false god, it's adultery and prostitution, which is kind of the same allegory that's being used. And so if you have that as the allegory being designed, then yeah, you could look at that as being that spirit of prostitution, which is that sort of understanding that when you do that, you have the ability to maybe mix those types of things, and that opens up a door. Now, that's all speculation, but it's a possibility. I mean, we are given these laws for a reason. So, and there's a lot of reasons for them. We just don't know what they all are.
Now, I don't know if it's necessarily a biblical term, the term soul tie, but I know it's definitely used in a lot of Christian circles. This concept of soul ties being related to spiritual ties to people and all that, and it does sound like something that could be linked to quantum entanglement. I mean, the terms, they kind of, you see a couple parallels with ties and entanglement, so maybe there's something there at all.
Yeah, possibly. I mean, we don't know, but it's a good question to do some speculating on. That's for sure.
All right, the next question: could the Tower of Babel be compared to CERN?
Yes, I think so. Simply because, as I said before, in Akkadian, it was translated as Bab for gateway and El for God. That I think the technology that Nimrod was developing, and in the occultist belief system on Nimrod, is he received the 7 sacred sciences and technologies from Hermes, who found the pillars of Lamech, which are the Boaz and Joachim pillars of Freemasonry from the antediluvian epoch. He goes to the vaults underneath the pyramids, and he brings that information back to Nimrod, and they partner to develop that knowledge again. And everybody's under one sway. And so you have this massive knowledge being developed under an Antichrist type figure with Hermes as a false prophet type figure, building a pyramid that can be translated in Akkadian, which descends out of Nimrod after Babel when he goes and continues in developing those religions in the Babylon and Shinar Sumer area, saying gateway to the gods. It's like CERN, right? The allegorical overlay is too big of a coincidence to ignore. And that's why I think you have the Babylon religion of the end time based on Babel. Because again, everything ties together and everything repeats over and over and over.
And I think that also ties into this whole concept of hive mind that we've been talking about.
Yeah.
We can't have a hive mind when we're separated by these language barriers, which is exactly what happened at the Tower of Babel, is these language barriers. But once you have some way for everybody to be able to communicate together in a seamless fashion and everybody understands each other no matter what language barrier or nationality you are, then it does make it possible for a mass communication and a mass
And clearly at Babel, it says, with working as one people with one language, literally nothing that, humans want to do will be prevented from them doing. So there's something to this hive mind in conjunction with what they were doing at Babel that suggests that that is interconnected.
All right. Our next question is Ezekiel 9:4 talks about God's seal on the foreheads from weeping and against wickedness. Could the mark of the beast be the same thing for liking wickedness? And they will have the same mindset. I'm familiar with this passage because the man in the linen cloth goes up and Ezekiel, they say, don't harm anybody until they're sealed on their forehead. Yep. Of course, a parallel with what we see in the language in Revelation where the angel says, hold up, don't let anybody be harmed or anything further to happen until the sons of God are marked on the forehead. So what do you see with this marking on the forehead?
In Ezekiel 9 or in Revelation?
Well, I think it's parallel. And I didn't mean to make that conclusion, but with those who are being sealed by God on their foreheads, this is happening in conjunction with the mark of the beast. What do you think this seal of God?
Again, I think there's a parallel here that I was making earlier that Antichrist and Satan, they're trying to counterfeit everything, right? So their mark is going to be a counterfeit of whatever God's seal is, just as the 144,000 in the end time are going to have God's seal. And also Cain had some sort of mark or seal put on him. And so I think there's a relationship there, but I know the occultists think that the mark of Cain is basically the Oribus with an Ankh in the middle, but that doesn't mean that that's accurate. I don't think anybody really knows what that mark is going to be. But I do think there's going to be something that is a flip side of the coin as to what the 144,000 are going to be sealed with at the beginning of the last 7 years. So, but I have no idea what that mark's going to be. You can only speculate.
I know they brought it out in Ezekiel 9 that those who were marked were the ones who mourned and wept over the wickedness of the city that they lived in and over the wickedness of their people. So they were the ones who were marked specifically in Ezekiel. And I know in Revelation it talks about the 144,000 have a song no man knows, and they also have the song of Moses.
Yes.
So these are some, signifying qualities maybe that relate to the mark, but I don't know for sure.
Yeah, it's again interesting to think about, but these are things that we won't know until we see them. Because if I think if God wanted us to know what those marks and seals were, you'd get a description in Scripture, both good and bad in terms of each scenario. But we really don't get that physical description, and it may be so that you don't have some of the idol worship going on that if you knew what it was as well. But it's just, to me, it's just too elusive in my thinking as to what it will be. I got interesting thoughts on it, but again, it's just there's nothing that I have that is substantive to say that I think this is what it's going to be.
All right, our next question is, Gary, what are your thoughts on ancient texts that talk about AI and super technology?
What are my thoughts on ancient texts?
Yeah, are there ancient
Right.
texts
Yes. Yeah,
about?
I got it. Yeah. Yeah, I think, as I said before, that I think the technology in the antediluvian world was greater than what we have today. And the reason why I think that is that a very, very important thing that I would extrapolate to suggest that, and that's what Jesus says about his second coming and the end time, that it will be like the days of Noah.
Mm-hmm.
And our technology is very highly advanced today, but we're not in the end time yet. And then we get all of these accounts of all of these technologies that were taught from the gods to the people, flying machines in some cultures, tapping into the tree of life, tapping into the tree of knowledge, the Anunnaki depictions, the Egyptian stuff, the ability to create fabulous beings in whether it's in Egyptology with I think it's Beast or Best as the god that opens Pandora's box and creates all of these beings, and we see all of this also happening in Greek mythology. I think there is this very high level of technology that was developed that indeed it will be like the days of Noah, and the technology is going to be continuing to develop till we get to that same level. So my thoughts on this ancient technology that we're seeing in Sumeria and the Anunnaki, I think that was probably real, but that's just my speculation.
Do you think the reason we don't really have a lot of evidence today of this technology is because society was so clustered during those times, or that society was perhaps located in a place that we haven't been able to dig up and investigate? Or do you think the type of technology they had something that could have just degraded over time? Because I mean, we have metallic iPhones and cars and all this kind of stuff today, and you'd think that if they had that type of technology, there'd be something lasting, especially if they had metal alloys and all that kind of stuff. So do you think they did have that type of technology? It was just comprised with a different form of holding it all together, or why do you think we haven't been able to find that in today's world?
Yeah, we only get very, very small artifacts that are called ooparts, out of place artifacts. And some of them, suggest a great technology. And the buildings that we see, whether it's pyramids or Machu Picchu, of a technology of building that we don't have today. So we get these hints and we get these pictures and reliefs of stuff suggesting great technology, like those interesting Anunnaki pictures where you've got these Anunnaki around this sort of tree of life, and they've got this handbag that might be technology we don't know. They've got this pine cone thing that might be a crystal. They got these other things that they're plugging into it. There's a suggestion of this technology. So why don't we see any of that? Well, I think the destruction of the earth at the time of the flood was more pervasive than just the flood. And even in my book, I put in there that there's more going on as it's described in the Psalms and elsewhere about what actually took place, with the earth crust actually kind of splitting. I think things went up and down. Right. I think there was volcanoes, earthquakes, tornadoes. There might have been even some asteroids that, would have triggered the flood. We know the flood's the greatest thing, but we have all of these underground cities. We have all of these sunken cities around the world. I think you had the whole earth sort of crust or surface going up and down. And I think a lot of it is underwater and covered because of the great turmoil that took on in the flood. And there's lots of accounts around the world that it was a set of cataclysms, not just the flood. And again, I make those biblical connections in my book in the Atlantis chapters, if people are interested to read that. So I think that's really what was going on there. And that's why they can't find, not that you could trust secular history anyways, but that's why they can't find a all-encompassing flood, because they're just looking for flood evidence. But if there's a cataclysm of events, then it would be a lot more difficult. And who knows? We don't even know. It could be a lot, under Antarctica for all we know, under the snow that wasn't perhaps under the snow before the flood, right? I mean, there's a lot of different things as to why. But I do think there was more than one civilization, which is why we see pyramids all around the world.
And of course, we know that that's some of what the Nazis were going down to Antarctica, because they believed they were finding certain things down there and the bases that they were making. And we know that they had access to certain types of technology during the World War II period that either was coming from, fallen entities through their seances and their occult practices, or that they were finding and they were, going after and trying to recreate.
Yeah, well, they literally say that their technology was gotten and enhanced by the spirits or guides that they were in contact with, right? So typical in those secret society type and theosophy, or Ariosophy as they call it, polytheist Gnosticism, where they engage with this communication, because they develop their tanks, their warfare strategy, their jet engines, their rocket engine, this bell-shaped time travel thing, in such a short period of time. It is unaccountable when they went from nothing to the most advanced weapons in the world almost overnight.
And you had mentioned the Vedic text early in the show in regards to these ancient texts that seem to talk about some type of technology. And you had brought up the topic of waveform and how it kind of references this. And I know with Nikola Tesla, there's a lot of research that he did into this whole concept of frequency and wave. Is there a connection between that type of technology and what we saw Nikola Tesla diving into?
Yes, and the Vedas will actually combine wave and particle, which is where science is basically at today.
All right. Our next question is: what are you seeing in world politics? With there are rumors of war, interesting alliances being formed. What are your views on that?
Well, I think things are still shuffling, although I don't see, a significant shift in the sort of trans-world geopolitics. We still have basically the same players. So I don't see a lot that's shifting out there. There's still some pushing and stuff going on. I still think that, the Chinese are going to have to become stronger and the Russians are going to become stronger. I think Europe needs to split into two. But I do believe that the basic formations for the 10 groups of empires are out there. They just haven't quite solidified yet. And that's the shuffle that we're going to see. But they'll come together and be almost all in place by the time Antichrist comes along to do the treaty that's going to solidify the peace for the people in Israel and the world.
Do you think artificial intelligence is going to play a role in these wars that are coming in the next few years, that the military having access to these hyper smart computers, hyper fast computers, are going to allow them to do the warfare that they intend to?
Yeah, and they're going to have to test them, right? So they're going to have some wars to test some of this technology, which is why a lot of wars get started, so they can see how their new weapons work. So I think, they're going to be used and they're going to be part of the wars. And I also think that there's this coming together of this AI and this alien thing that's going to drive the world geopolitical scenario into its final situation as well. I think we're going to have more of an alien introduction before we get into the end times, in its sort of full level of deception. So
I know we have to be close to disclosure because you see them preparing us so much. I mean, 2 years ago, MSN came out saying is Obama going to drop disclosure before he leaves office? Because we know that apparently Trump is going to be willing to do it when he gets into office. So, I mean, even mainstream media sources are saying that disclosure has to be close because they know there's something going on behind the covers there.
Yeah, I think so. I think we're getting very, very close to that happen. You're even seeing like Fox News was carrying UFO reporting on some of the shows and has regular sort of updates every 2 months. So I think when you're starting to see the mainstream media, not that Fox is totally mainstream, but they're still considered part of the larger group out there, that when they're showing that I think we're getting closer and closer and closer. And they've got people at a position for the most part worldwide that they're not going to be shocked about it, right? That if they all of a sudden said today we're not alone in the universe, and by the way, here they are, we might ooh and ah a little bit, but we've been well brainwashed to accept this. So, and they say well over 50% of the world believes that we're not alone in the universe. So they're getting close to that critical mass to do so, I think.
All right, our next question is, have you heard of the black goo? It seems connected to AI. Can you think of any references in scripture about this black goo? Or what are, just in general, are your thoughts on black goo, and what is that?
Yeah, I haven't heard about black goo in the last few years. It was kind of out there, but I don't know what black goo is. I know it comes out of the occult sciences, and it's used in black magic, and but other than that, I have no idea what it is. Sorry.
So let me just make a logical assumption here and talk about microscopic technology, nanotechnology. I mean, that seems to be something that could be associated with a goo and something that might get on you or in you. What are your thoughts on nanotechnology and how this plays a role with all of this?
Well, I mean, the thing about nanotechnology, it allows you to get to below the surface into DNA, right? From the smallest building blocks up. It allows you to build clones. It allows you to change DNA. It allows you to create new things out of almost nothing, right? How they inject life into that's a little bit more of a question. So I don't know whether it can actually quite build it from nothing, but it can get down to those building blocks. So yeah, if that goo has any power, they could build that from that subatomic world in the world of quantum, the quantum world to build that up. But I have no idea what the black goo is designed to do.
Well, our next question coming in is, bear with me as I read through this. It's kind of asking your opinion on this, but many Twitter users have reported receiving spooky voice messages, apparently encrypted, causing terror among people. The messages that is given is with a robotic voice, including a strange code that many have tried to decipher and say may be linked to Malaysian flight MH370 and some possible extraterrestrial warnings, with the danger SOS saying, terrible for you to evacuate, be careful not to be human, and then a bunch of numbers, SOS, danger, SOS. So people are getting some really weird messages and things that seem to be coming from automated sources. What are you thinking about this?
We don't know whether it's totally true. So what tends to happen is that you have odd things that get reported that are true, and then you have misinformation that's out there. So it's hard to know which one that this is, but I think as we get closer and higher levels of technology, it starts to hit that threshold of being able to cross interdimensionally again in that aspect of its technology. And I think it's whether or not you're seeing some things that reach through into different dimensions, or it's preparing us for that. It's more likely preparing us for what's coming, but my speculation only.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of the warning that there was a nuclear attack about to fall on Hawaii.
Yeah.
Nothing happened, of course. It was a false alarm, but it kind of makes me think that these messages, if it's not just a prank, of course, it very likely could be just somebody messing with people. But if these messages are going out, that it is just preparing people's mindset, maybe chipping away at the reactionary blocks, so that eventually, when it is real and that there is a mass automated message, they're going to know how people will react.
They'll know how people react, and they'll be prepared. And they seem to have a need to tell us what's going to happen. And so it's out there in plain sight, so that when people do become deceived, they have no excuses as to why they were deceived when the accounting happens. So I think it's a lot of it is part of that. But I just, the biggest thing that I always look for is how much end time brainwashing they're doing for us to prepare us. So I think anything that sort of leads in that direction is them manipulating us to more easily accept what's going to be coming.
All right, we have just a few more questions here that we're going to get through, and we'll wrap up tonight. And the next question was, what are your thoughts on these underground bases and programmable matter?
Well, again, if you can get down into the quantum world and using nanotechnology and all sorts of other things that we may not even know that's there, and you can build things up from the bottom, you can program anything any way you want it. That's part of the geomancy of cryptology that they have been working on for hundreds of years, and now have some of that technology to do. So to me, anything that you can build up through the mathematical sciences, you can program. So that makes perfect sense. And I'd be surprised if they weren't doing that already.
All right, our next question. Could they be resurrecting dead giants through genetic technology? And
well, that's what a lot of people think. And again, there's a lot of speculation out there, and that in these underground things, they've actually got giant Nephilim that they brought back to life, or they've recreated. Same with down in Antarctica, which is what people speculate about. Or they've taken DNA from Gilgamesh or another giant, or Nimrod, on tombs that they found with the Iraq War, and they're recreating giants that way. I don't know if we're actually going to see giants in the end time, except that it's going to be like the days of Noah. So whether it's descendants or actual giants, or these ones coming out of the abyss, or others are going to be impassioned and recreate them again, I do believe we are going to have an impression somehow, some way of the giants. But again, I don't know whether or not this is just misinformation to get us ready for the acceptance of these beings that were, and what they're going to be bringing about in the end time or not. Because many of the giants, I mean, they've lost their bodies, right? So if they're creating giants underground, then these are bodies for these demon spirits to go in, and not necessarily new ones. But there could be new ones. So it's hard to know, but I do believe that we're going to be affected by Nephilim in the end time. But again, I tend to not talk a lot about these ideas that are being speculated on, that's going on in these underground caverns and experiments, because I'm afraid it's misinformation more than anything. And again, it's that end time preparation that I tend to harp on. So it's possible, but I think it's more end time brainwashing. But I'm not dismissing that we're going to see an impact of the Nephilim in the end time somehow, some way.
all right, this is our last question of the night. What does Gary think about chemtrails, smart dust, and can this be tied into the AI beast system control that could be tech of the antediluvian world?
Yeah, I don't know whether it would tie into AI. Certainly, it would be very creative, I suppose, and I'm not sure how it would do that. But certainly, in terms of corrupting the plant world and the animal world, and or affecting weather and bringing about contrived catastrophes, that could very well be what they're doing, or trying to change the terraforming for some beings that they want to have come visit or create. That seems to be more likely. But there is so much of this chemtrail and extracurricular activity that's designed to affect our environment, that nothing is beyond what they're capable of doing if you understand the total level of evil that they're working from. But I've not heard or read or talked to anybody about a connection to AI on it, but it's an interesting thought.
I guess it all depends on what exactly are in the chemtrails. I mean,
Yeah.
if you're seeding the skies with nanobots, then sure.
Yeah.
Heavy metals or something that's going to allow our brain to be, connected to the 5G system or whatever system they're going to be implementing, possibly. But, it just all depends on what actually is in the chemtrails. So that's what I think. Well, Gary, I think that's all. Did you have any final thoughts to share about artificial intelligence and why this is something people need to be looking at on their radar as coming up in the next few years?
Yeah, I just think from an overall basis that as addictive and as seductive as technology is for us, we have to be prepared to walk from it at a certain point. And everybody is going to have their own walk line. And you and I were talking about what is that ultimate mass, critical mass walk line, but everybody's going to have to arrive at that on their own, because this whole technology, AI, seductiveness is how they're going to get us into the universal religion and to follow Antichrist and to rebel against God. And so I think, anything that starts to get involved with inside your body with technology is just a line not to cross. And I think we have to be very, very wary of it. And it's quickly going beyond just being, more than a phone, right? I mean, it's becoming much more than that. So it's getting close to the walk lines, I think.
Now, for those of you who are interested in getting into a little bit more of the ancient cultures and stuff, definitely check out Gary's book, The Genesis 6 Conspiracy. Where can people find that, Gary?
You can go to my website. That's now up and running. I'll be putting out a note on it again. I've been attacked by bots, so I've been learning all about those. But it's now up. So Genesis6conspiracy.com, the Genesis 6 with the number 6, conspiracy.com. On the website, I've got a generous excerpt of all 98 chapters. So you can get a good feel for the book, and you can order a signed copy through that site, or you can link to Amazon.com or BarnesandNoble.com, or to the Kindle format and Amazon.ca. It's also available through most online bookstores. And if you wanted to support your local bookstore, it's distributed by Bookmasters, so that you can have them order it in if you wanted to do so to support your local bookstore. And if you want to get a hold of me, you can get a hold of me through Facebook or my website, or on Twitter at GaryWayne63, at GaryWayne63.
Excellent. And for those of you who didn't catch it at the beginning of the show, we have transferred the NYUCTV Live Hub over to nystv.org, and you can check that out here, nystv.org, and you can click the live stream hub. This is where we are going to be having our live stream capabilities and such. You can watch the episode here, and you can also join the NYUCTV family chat down here to ask questions during the show. Now, also, we wanted to ask anybody who's watching right now if you would subscribe to our mailing list. We recently had a company that had all of our people who had subscribed to our mailing list lost all of our contacts. They just totally messed up and deleted them all, and they were very apologetic, but it doesn't make it up that we lost all of our email addresses. So if you would, sign up for our mailing address here, and this is where you'll find out about upcoming content, and you'll hear about any big news announcements or any shows that we're going to be putting out in the future. So that's where you'll find out about it. And of course, if you haven't had a chance yet, check out nystv.org. There's a lot of other cool content on here. So it's definitely worth taking a look at. And also, if you would like, share, and subscribe this video, helps us get the word out for content like this. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in to Now You See TV. Until next time, I've been your host, Jake Grant. Thank you, Gary, for joining us tonight. It's been great having you.
Thank you. It's been hopefully a good discussion, and hopefully we've given some people a few things to chew on and to dig a little bit deeper into, because this is going to become more important day by day.
Absolutely. All right, everybody. Take care. Good night. High five. Psh. Thanks for joining us on Now You See TV.